Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to embark on a seriously massive spatial journey. We are going to start with the ultimate macro view, our entire planet, and zoom all the way down to its distinct interconnected bodies of water and the massive stretches of land that we actually call home. We'll be breaking down the fundamental geography of Earth, piece by piece. So, let's get started.
To truly understand our planet, you first have to look at it from the outside. Imagine looking out the window of a spacecraft, staring back at the Earth. What is the very first thing that strikes you? It's the color, right? That overwhelmingly widespread blue. In fact, early astronauts, when looking back at our home from the absolute void of space, lovingly dubbed it the blue planet. But what exactly does all that blue represent? And how much of our world does it actually cover?
So, the crucial point is, when you break down the actual math of our globe, it is fundamentally divided into two major categories: expansive saltwater bodies and massive land masses. And the split? It is pretty staggering. Roughly 71% of the Earth's surface is entirely covered in water, leaving only about 29% as land. We are, quite literally, living on a minority of our own planet's surface.
But here is where it gets kind of wild, because this planetary distribution isn't equal at all. If you split the globe in half, the northern hemisphere contains about 60% water and 40% land. However, if you look at the globe from the South Pole, it is almost entirely aquatic. The southern hemisphere is nearly 80% water and only 20% land. It's a beautifully lopsided world.
All right, let's transition to the water portion of our tour. Now, we often hear about different oceans, but it is absolutely vital to understand that the dividing lines you see on maps, those are just human conventions. We created those boundaries to make it easier for us to study and navigate. In reality, the natural world doesn't recognize them at all. Seawater flows completely freely across these regions, making all the oceans one massive, single, interconnected system.
However, for our own understanding, we traditionally categorize this global water system into 5 distinct oceans. We start with the Pacific, spanning between the Americas and Asia, which is so staggeringly huge, it actually covers more area than all the land masses combined. No way, right? Next is the Atlantic, separating the Americas from Europe and Africa. Then the Indian Ocean, bounded by Asia, Africa, and Australia. Down at the bottom of the globe, we have the icy Southern or Antarctic Ocean. And finally, covering the northern polar region, the absolute smallest, the Arctic Ocean.
Let's focus on that third largest one for a second, because it holds a very unique geographic distinction. The Indian Ocean is the only ocean named after a specific country, and this brilliantly illustrates the deep cultural connection between land and sea. For instance, if you look at the emblem of the Indian Navy, the motto reads, "Sum no Varuna," which translates to, "Be auspicious to us, O Varuna." Varuna is the ancient Vedic deity associated with the oceans and water, perfectly showcasing how deeply respected these waters are in human culture.
These interconnected oceans, they are the true lifelines of our planet. The marine flora, like tiny algae and seaweed, are often called the planet's lungs. Why? Because they produce more than 50% of the Earth's oxygen. They also support incredible fauna, from giant whales to totally mysterious, alien-looking creatures in the pressurized deep. But this life-giving force also harbors immense raw power. Natural disasters like powerful cyclones and the devastating 2004 tsunami, which was triggered by an undersea earthquake near Indonesia, they forcefully remind us of the highly dangerous, unchecked power of the ocean.
Okay, having explored the massive watery expanse that dominates our world, let's bring our spatial journey back to dry ground. We know a large, continuous expanse of land is called a continent. But here is a surprisingly tricky question for you. Exactly how many continents are there? Think you know? Well, if you ask a geologist, a historian, and a geographer, you might actually get 3 completely different answers.
See, depending on how you interpret geography, you can group the world's major landmasses into anywhere from 4 to 7 continents. For example, Europe and Asia form one continuous landmass, which geologists call Eurasia. So some models combine them, some combine North and South America. It really all depends on whether you're drawing lines based on physical geography, like shifting tectonic plates, or based on distinct human history and culture.
And culture actually plays a massive role in this counting game. We've all seen the 5 Olympic rings, right? But did you know they actually represent a 5-continent model? Now, what's really interesting about this is that the rings were chosen to symbolize the gathering of athletes from the 5 historically inhabited continents: Africa, the Americas combined into one, Asia, Australia, and Europe. They explicitly leave off Antarctica because, well, it lacks a permanent native human population.
Despite all these different ways of slicing the pie, for the rest of our explainer today, we're going to use the 7-continent model. This convention is the one most widely accepted and taught globally, dividing the landmasses pretty clearly by both major geographic bottlenecks and significant cultural and historical divides.
So let's rank our 7 continents strictly by their physical land area. We start at the top with massive Asia, followed by Africa, North America, South America, the icy expanse of Antarctica, the relatively compact Europe, and finally, the smallest of the major land masses, Australia. Let's take a quick flyover of each to see what makes them so unique. We begin with Asia, a continent of absolute extremes. It covers roughly 30% of the Earth's total land surface. It's staggeringly huge and incredibly dense with human life, acting as home to massive, heavily populated nations like China and India. It contains the highest point on Earth, Mount Everest in the Himalayas, massive river systems, and the literal roots of some of the oldest continuous human cultures, like the Indus Valley Civilization.
Next, we contrast the second-largest continent with the second smallest. Africa is renowned for its immense natural wonders, hosting the vast Sahara Desert, the world's longest river, the Nile, and an incredibly diverse, expansive wildlife population. On the flip side, you have Europe. It might be small in physical area, but it casts a massive global shadow. It's defined by a dense historical footprint rooted in ancient Greek and Roman civilizations, leading right up to modern industrial economies.
Moving across the Atlantic, we hit the Americas. North America, which is home to Canada, the United States, and Mexico, boasts some of the world's most dramatic natural landmarks. I'm talking from the plunging depths of the Grand Canyon to the incredibly rugged Rocky Mountains. Directly to its south, South America offers a wildly different landscape, totally dominated by the dense, sprawling Amazon rainforest and the towering Andes mountain range.
Way down in the southern hemisphere lies Australia, which is sometimes grouped into the wider region of Oceania. Now, this continent holds a completely unique status. While it is the smallest of all 7 continents, it is so distinct that it is entirely occupied by a single massive nation, and it's surrounded by the beautiful island nations of the Pacific. It features this crazy mix of gorgeous beaches, vast inland deserts, and completely unique wildlife you literally won't find anywhere else.
And then we have the 5th largest continent, lying at the very bottom of the world, Antarctica. This is a place that actively resists human life. It is, without a doubt, the coldest, driest, and windiest continent on Earth. 98% of its surface is buried under a permanent ice cap. Because of these extreme hostile conditions, it is the only continent without a permanent native human population.
But hey, a lack of permanent residence doesn't mean humans aren't there at all. Antarctica is an incredible hub for global scientific research. For example, India established its first scientific base station there, named Dakshin Gangotri, way back in 1983. Scientists from all over the world braved the freezing temperatures to study the ice, the weather, and unique wildlife like penguins and seals. They are out there unlocking secrets about our planet's past climate.
Now, before we finish our tour of the land, we have to mention the pieces that didn't quite make the continent list. When a piece of land is entirely surrounded by water, but just isn't large enough to be classified as a continent on its own, we call it an island. There are millions of islands scattered across the globe, with Greenland officially taking the title for the absolute largest. And this brilliantly illustrates how these smaller islands actually integrate with massive continental nations. Take India, for example. Just off the coast, you have major island chains that are an essential part of the country's territory. To the east, in the Bay of Bengal, sit the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. To the west, in the Arabian Sea, you'll find the Lakshadweep Islands. These chains act as crucial, vibrant extensions of continental life.
Ultimately, what our macro-spatial tour really reveals is that the land and the water are not separate stories. They are deeply interconnected lifelines. The oceans literally drive the weather systems, like the crucial monsoon rains that sustain all the agriculture on the continents. For centuries, the oceans were the superhighways for human trade, migration, and the spreading of cultures. The land and the sea exist in a permanent, incredibly delicate balance that sustains every single living thing on Earth.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer with a vital, pressing question for you to consider. We know how essential and beautiful this system is, but we also know it is highly vulnerable to human activity and pollution. Knowing that 71% of our home is a single, interconnected water system that keeps the land masses thriving, how will you help protect the delicate balance of our blue planet? Think about it. Thanks for exploring with us, and we'll see you next time.